At the Julian Way, we empower individuals with disabilities to thrive in faith communities by breaking barriers and fostering belonging. Your support helps us create accessible spaces where everyone feels valued and seen. Join us in making a difference today at www.thejulianway.org. Together, we can build communities of belonging.
Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to another edition of Palsies with Palsies. I'm your palsy, Justin Hancock.
And I'm your palsy, Bekah Anderson.
Afternoon, Bekah.
Hey, Justin, how's it going?
Well, we've got full bellies and almost sleepy faces, but we're gonna work our way out of the post-lunch sleeps with a scintillating conversation, I'm sure. How are you?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely go beyond almost sleepy to definitively sleepy. But yeah, we are fighting that. We are so awake. This is what awake people look like. Friends, for context, it is Monday afternoon. And something about Monday afternoons, it's like you spend the weekend doing whatever weekend things you're doing, and then you get to Monday and your body's like, okay, but we only actually work for half of Monday, right? The rest of Monday is a nap. And that's not how my schedule works, actually.
Yes, I keep hearing the refrain of a Hamilton parody I ran across on Facebook the other day that talks about aging, and instead of "You'll be back," it is King George the Third singing "You'll need naps." You'll see. Yeah, and I told our friend and colleague Ken Crawford that I'd never identified with a piece of content so hard in my life.
What's funny is I'm actually remarkably bad at napping, but that doesn't stop my body from wanting to.
Yeah, I know I'm a terrible nap picker, but the desire to I want to improve, the desire to be better at it is always there. But moving away from that sleepy subject, we are going to talk today about the ongoing situation around food and food insecurity as it regards SNAP benefits. So, Rebecca, we're not here to talk about naps, as comforting as that would be, as I record like 6 inches from my bed. Um,
Yeah, if we want to do an episode on naps, just say the word. I think we can make that happen.
yeah, that would be I'm fairly certain that episode would end with one of us or both of us snoring. So maybe later, but perhaps, or in fact, we are here to talk about the subject of food insecurity and disability as relates to the ongoing and ever evolving SNAP uh, SNAP benefit situation in the United States.
hmm
And I was saying to our audience just before we had a little bit of a technical issue, so I'll say it again. We've had this on the calendar for a while,
hmm
and I've never seen a news story that changed so much hour to hour
Yeah.
as this story did and is and probably will twice by the time we get done recording.
Mm-hmm.
So we're both gonna try to bring you up to speed on where things stand now, but we want to broaden this conversation out into both why is SNAP so important and what does SNAP actually do for those with disabilities. So, Bekah, to the best of your considerable talent, give us a rundown of what we know thus far or to this point.
I will do my best. Yeah, so I think I'm going to take a leaf out of the NPR Politics podcast book here and give a timestamp. We are recording this podcast on Monday, November 10th at 2:30 p.m. It will be airing this Friday, November 14th. Yes. But so there may be potentially some new information in the show notes as things evolve, but we only have the knowledge of Monday, November 10th at 2:30 p.m. So the basics. SNAP is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also sometimes known as food stamps, and it is a federal program that provides money to low-income folks to buy food. And very specifically to buy food. There are some products that you can get with SNAP and other things that you can't. And at this time in November 2025, there is currently a government shutdown going on. If anyone either hasn't heard or is listening from a time in the future where you blessedly have forgotten that this happened, the Trump administration reported that because there is no government funding, that there was not funding available to distribute SNAP benefits for November, despite the fact that they have managed to move money around to fund other things that they think are important. Feeding people somehow was not. So at this time, courts in Rhode Island and I believe Massachusetts last week ordered the administration to use certain emergency funds to fund the SNAP program, potentially either to pay 65% of benefits or to pay the entirety of benefits. And at first, the administration said they were going to pay 65% of benefits, and then the court said, no, actually, you need to pay the entirety of benefits. And so the administration appealed to an appeals court. The appeals court, it looked like, wasn't going to get back to them by the deadline that the lower court had set for them to distribute these benefits. So they went to the Supreme Court and asked for that order to be paused until the appeals court could weigh in. The Supreme Court did agree to that, so over the weekend, the administration did not have to distribute benefits. Today, the appeals court basically said, no, you do have to go listen to what the Rhode Island, Massachusetts court said. You do have to go pay 100% of benefits, which has now started a clock that, according to the order from the Supreme Court, 48 hours from now, the administration will need to start complying with that order. But they're now working on other ways in which they can appeal that, so that still may change. This does not mean that on Wednesday SNAP benefits are going to go out, because if there are more appeals put in place, there may be more pauses on that distribution timeline. And in addition to that, the Senate, the U.S. Senate, has now passed a bill to fund the government. So if the House also passes a similar bill, then the government will reopen and SNAP benefits will resume as normal, and none of this will need to be appealed further. But we just don't know at this time whether the House will pass such a bill this week. So basically, SNAP benefits could go out in full in 2 days, or this could drag on for another week, several more weeks. We just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I hope some of that made sense, because it only half makes sense to me.
I tell you what, it's been, as someone who grew up in politics and grew up in a house where politics were openly discussed, I don't get dizzy with a lot of things, even among the relatively unhinged climate of the Trump administration. I not only mean that in terms of pace of information, I don't get dizzy by a lot, but this made me somewhat dizzy.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out why and who was where and what this meant. And I think
Yep.
as a segue into what we're talking about more broadly, I think it's important to note how close this is to both you and I, being on the administrative side of the Julian way and relating to the people that we relate to. This was most government uh, funding issues can seem somewhat remote and second and third hand. This felt very and feels very I don't have to go a long way to relate to it. Let's say that much.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's people that we know personally that we provide care for that are affected by this, that are wondering how they're going to be able to afford food this month. And we know that there are even more people out there that we don't know, but that are parts of our communities. And yeah, it's just a very close to home issue in a way that not everything can feel like it is.
Exactly. And I won't be ashamed to say that growing up, when I did and where I did, I had the fairly stereotypical view of a white somebody with privilege of what food stamps were, um, until I got into ministry and really realized how much this isn't a handout. This is the underpinning and it's like it would be the same thing as calling. If this is a handout, the foundation to your house is also a handout. And that just I've been making up for lost time over the last several years because that really is still dawning on me how true that is. But let's talk about that for a little bit. Just how critical of a bridge SNAP can be for many in our community, and many of the families in our community rely on SNAP as a key part of their monthly planning and budgeting. So when it's not there, it's a large hole.
Yeah. So the numbers of people in our country overall who are SNAP beneficiaries is staggering. It's just a huge percentage of people, and I wish I had the data in front of me, but I don't. Hopefully, we'll add that to the show notes. It's a lot of children. It's a lot of families with young children. And in particular, in our context, we're very aware that it's a lot of folks with disabilities. And we've talked before on this show about some of the financial realities of disability. And so, once you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, that we've talked before about the Social Security system and how if you are on SSI or SSDI, two of the forms of Social Security available to disabled folks, you have very strict income limits. You are not allowed to earn very much at all. And the amount that you get in cash benefits from those programs is just frankly not enough to live on. We're talking, $1,000, $1,500, maybe $2,000 a month. And, think about what your monthly expenses are and, how many of us really can pay all of our bills with that. It's virtually nobody. And so for folks on those programs, whether they can, physically work or not, they can't without risking losing their benefits and probably their health insurance. So what ways do they have to be able to afford the things that they need? Well, SNAP is a pretty critical part of those. That then adds a couple $100 to your monthly income essentially for food specifically, and that is going to mean that you can eat and still pay your rent. You're not, hopefully, you're not going to need to choose whether to eat, to pay your rent, or to keep your electricity on. And without SNAP, people really are making those kinds of decisions.
Yeah. It just occurred to me that a proper title for this episode is probably something like walking or journeying through a spider web, because when you think of the way that SNAP fits into a typical disabled person's framework, if such a thing exists as a typical disabled person, it's not, I don't know, we tend to isolate, quote unquote, big finger quotes here, welfare benefits as a narrative device in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it would behoove us when we think of things like Social Security, like I have superior health insurance through the Medicaid exchange and SNAP. When you think of that, I think for a lot of disabled people, it's helpful to think of that as a web that helps disabled people live within their communities with a relative degree of freedom and autonomy as much as they can achieve. So when you think of that way, if one of these things is removed, and SNAP, which you count on every month, so you can get food and pay your rent, or get food and clothe your children, if that plank is removed because the government is shut down, then there are 3 or 4 other aspects of your life system that are connected to that domino. And if one of those dominoes isn't there, what happens to the rest of the system? It either falls apart or becomes incredibly strained.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really stark to think of it that way. So when we have a scenario where Snap has literally been on a yo-yo for the last 10 days, um, you can really get some peace of mind by 9 a.m. hearing one report, and then by 2:30 p.m. and you've started to make plans based on the 9 a.m. update, and those plans no longer exist. It really affects all parts of someone in that system's life, and I think that those effects are doubled and tripled and quadrupled if you're disabled because of how much
Mm-hmm.
you're dependent on the broader sort of benefit web or the broader like
Mm-hmm.
benefit system, if that makes sense.
Totally. No, I mean I think sometimes people might think like, well, like you've got Social Security and SNAP and Medicaid, like, you're on all of these different programs and like surely you don't actually need all of them. And it's like, no, actually you do, because sometimes the way that these systems are written and sometimes just the ways that they have evolved over time, they all kind of assume that you're using the other ones. Like
Yeah,
when you apply for SSI in some states, you're automatically applied for Medicaid, or or you might be automatically applied for food stamps, or like referred to your local SNAP office. Like these programs literally assume that you're going to be using multiple of them at a time, and so like the that system really
huh.
is designed to require all of that.
Yeah,
Um, and the other thing that I'm thinking about with this, is even for people who are not utilizing all of these programs, the reality is that being disabled is expensive. And so, like,
yeah,
say you are employed, you are working, you have health insurance that's not Medicaid, your costs for your medications could be astronomical. Your costs to see your doctors that might or might not be covered by your health insurance could be just completely unmanageable. Your costs for your assistive technology might be paid for by some sort of disability organization, but they might not. Um,
mm,
and so so there's someone that in my circles that uh, posted at the beginning of all of this that he and his family use Snap, and I was kind of surprised because I know that household has a higher income than some other families that I know, and that as far as I know that no one in that family is on Social Security, but they have a lot of health issues, and I know that those are expensive. And so it's like, yeah, when you take into account all of the extra costs of being disabled, somebody that you might otherwise look at and be like, you seem to be financially okay, really does need SNAP, because otherwise they're facing questions of, do I feed my family or do I get my medication?
yeah. And I think just to go back to the sort of the interconnectedness of all this, there are two things I wanted to bring up. One is that I ride paratransit in Dallas, and I don't know if the rules are the same because it's been years since I did my first application. But when I first applied, I believe Medicaid was a prerequisite, or some sort of supplemental disability insurance was a prerequisite.
Mm-hmm.
So for paratransit. So in order to get the bus service that allows me to go anywhere in the Metroplex and make it to meetings out of the house and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and ride all the fixed route buses for free,
Mm-hmm.
or at little to no cost to me or my family, I have to be on Medicaid. So again, and I'm thankful for it, but that's just another way that the disability industrial complex, let's say, really relies on tying you to a post in order to
Mm-hmm.
free your hands, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so that when you and I'll be honest, I was rather amazed in a good way at how many people on Snap actually manage to have really sustainable employment situations,
Mm-hmm.
which I mean, I do this for a living, and I was surprised. I don't know why I was surprised, because of course the narrative of the media, or the general, like, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps narrative, that why don't you get a job and yada yada yada. That's not
Mm-hmm.
true. It never is.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, just most people on Snap uh, are trying to do their best and are working and are using Snap as a bridge, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just shocking to see the way that it's been toyed with by both by politics in general, but by one group specifically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And another reality of uh, being disabled and food insecurity that has been coming to my mind is like, if if you are food insecure, if you need additional support, more than whatever your income is in order to put food on the table, if you have a lot of time and energy to devote to that, there are a lot of resources out there, right? Like, you can go to the many different grocery stores in your area and, follow the sales and, figure out who's got the cheapest what. And you can identify where all of the mobile food banks in your area are, and go to them when they're happening. Like, there are a lot of different ways that people can get food if money is an obstacle. However, if you are disabled, and frankly, if you are working a lot of hours, you just may not have the time or the energy to do all of those things.
Yeah,
Like, if you're disabled, like, you may, and you can't get to the grocery store independently, you're either looking at grocery delivery services, in which case ordering from multiple grocery stores is just frequently a very bad use of your money, because you're gonna pay multiple delivery fees. Or you've got, somebody helping you with transportation to the grocery store, and they may not be willing to go to multiple grocery stores to make sure that you can find all of the best prices. And you may or may not be able to get to all of the different sites where food distribution happens. So it's just one of those, like, yes, there may be lots of opportunities, but accessibility means that you can't necessarily take advantage of all of those opportunities. And so having Snap means that, okay, like, if I need to pay a little bit more in delivery fees than someone who's not disabled, if I need to pay like slightly higher costs for my produce because I can't go to the store where they're lower, well, at least I've got some funds to help with that. And
Yeah,
so now when you don't have SNAP benefits, it's like, okay, like I have been seeing and sharing a lot of posts about places to get food, where people can go, what services are available. And I've been wondering, even as I'm sharing it, how many of these are accessible to people who cannot physically get to those locations.
exactly. I could not agree more. And just looking at how often I say the phrase to you and to others, well, this was a week where I could either have a job or be disabled.
Yes.
Uh, because I needed to deal with Medicaid or I needed to deal with, I had several bus related disasters and scheduling snafus.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I am completely cognizant of what a blessing it is to have a spouse with a good paying job, and we're right up against the poverty line most months, but we're making it work. We're making a good effort at at a quote unquote finger quote normal life. So
Mm-hmm.
I really recognize the blessing that my choice is to have a job or be disabled.
Mm-hmm.
For many people that I know and people that are friends of mine, and on the surface, you wouldn't look at it and go, okay, there's somebody in poverty, or there's somebody who is shirking their responsibilities, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
But for whom the choice is, okay, I can either have a job or eat.
Mm-hmm.
And that really is legitimately what this country is facing right now. And with everything going on, um, even if the government is up and running tomorrow, it's going to take some time for sure for normal service to resume, as it were.
Yeah.
Um, and the longer it takes, and the more prices stay high in general, the hunger crisis may change shape over the next several weeks, but it's not going away.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's even more depth to that hunger crisis now because so food banks have been working really hard to meet to try and fill the gap of missing SNAP benefits for the past 10 days, right? And that is just something that system is not designed to do. So they're working really hard, but it A, isn't going to be enough, and B, is depleting their reserves. And beyond that, another part of government activities that's been shut down during the shutdown is the part where the federal government provides food to food banks and manages the systems that allow them to get the food that they distribute. And those orders didn't happen when they were supposed to, and there is concern that they might not be able to in a timely fashion. So food banks may have less food in the coming weeks, even if SNAP benefits are restored, and that's also a critical part of this system that is not necessarily going to immediately be okay when the government reopens.
So, it occurred to me, Becca, that you and I could talk about this pretty much ad nauseum for the next hour to hour and a half,
Mm-hmm.
and largely turn ourselves in circles and twist ourselves into pretty little knots.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this is a fairly bleak conversation, and rightfully so. It deserves to be as bleak as it actually is in the day-to-day reality of the situation. Excuse me. But I am conscious that the holidays are coming up,
Mm-hmm.
and that the refrain that you and I have heard definitely all of our professional lives, and probably even as we were growing up in the uh, religious households that we grew up in, is that the holidays can be hard for folks in this degree, for folks with disabilities facing hunger, for folks in general facing hunger, when
Mm-hmm.
there hasn't been a shutdown and when the systems are running at peak efficiency,
Yeah.
uh, which, you know, I don't want to, spend an hour bumming our audience out, but there's no way to have this conversation without it being a bummer to one degree or another.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but how would you, what as people of faith coming into Christmas and the holidays, what do we do? Like, I've got ideas about how to handle this, but
Mm-hmm.
for our audience who is less familiar with like the disability and how to be a how to stand against the system or stand in solidarity with someone.
Mm-hmm.
What would you recommend? I guess is the long way to ask that question.
Yeah, so I would say, I mean, one, advocacy, always good, to even though like all of this is tied up in the courts right now, that doesn't mean that your legislators can't do anything about it. They still have the ability to talk to people and to put pressure where pressure is needed. So you can always call your members of Congress and tell them how important this issue is to you. If you have if you have funds, if you have money available to donate, if you have some extra resources, donating money to your local food banks and food pantries and other services distributing food. I say specifically donating money because that is the way that your donations are going to be most effective. I've heard this from many different food distribution services. A food bank or pantry is able to purchase food at much lower costs than we are at the grocery store. They're able to buy things in bulk and able to get much lower prices. So as it's great to donate, canned goods and shelf stable things. That there's nothing wrong with that. But if you've got $25 and you're trying to decide whether to go buy a bunch of cans, you consider instead donating that directly to the food pantry because they'll be able to make that go further. And then the other thing that I would say is check in on your people, because I think we've established you may not know everyone in your circle who depends on SNAP benefits. Um,
Mhm.
they're just because somebody looks like they have a good paying job, just because they seem to be doing all right. They may be doing all right because they have SNAP benefits, or they may be working really hard to hide the fact that they're not doing all right. And so, checking in on folks, if it feels comfortable and okay to ask, if anyone's affected by the loss of SNAP. I think making clear that like this isn't a point of shame, that this is something that we can talk about and be honest about. And if you're not sure and you feel like you can't have that conversation, you can still invite someone over for dinner.
Hmm.
We can still share food with one another. Whether we have confirmation that someone needs it or not. Something that something that has brought me a lot of hope in this time is seeing how much people answer the call in a time like this. I have seen so many posts asking about raising money for various food distribution services. I have seen so many posts, talking about where everyone can go to get food. My local church has raised thousands of dollars to locally support our local food pantry. Um, I had a conversation, back at the end of October, with a friend of mine that's someone they knew had some extra money left on their SNAP card, um, before, and was worried that it was going to go away before, when November happened, and they didn't particularly need it. They have other sources of food, and can weather this for a month. So what they did is they went to the grocery store and they used all of that money to buy up as much shelf-stable food as they could, because you can only use SNAP benefits to buy food. You can't transfer them to somebody else. So they bought up food to donate. And people in the grocery store saw them carrying all this food to their car, and one person asked them, "Are you donating this to a food pantry?" And they said yes, and he gave them some cash to add to the donations that they were making. Like, people are really coming together in a time like this, and
Yeah.
I think the more that we can do that, the better we all are off. Both the people who are really suffering and struggling right now, and those of us who just need to be connected more.
Yeah. That was I'm so glad that you shared that last example, because it is so important to know that no matter what our place in the system, whether we place ourselves there, or other people place us as receivers or givers into the system or what have you, that we all have a role to play, and that we all can play the role of someone that contributes to someone else's flourishing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and another thing I will mention, and this goes to similar things to what you just talked about. If you don't feel comfortable asking your neighbor or your friend if they're on Snap, I would I would advise people. I have advised people to do this throughout the holidays on in other years of just going and getting 3 or 4 grocery store gift cards
Mm-hmm.
and carrying them around with you, and just if you see somebody that might need a hand, um, handing them out. But in this scenario, I mean, do that, absolutely. I always gonna say yes to give yourself that Christmas cheer of blessing someone's day randomly. But if you don't want to
Mm-hmm.
inquire as to whether a neighbor has Snap, I know the best thing for my money that you can do is go talk to your pastor or your
Yeah.
rabbi or your imam or your spiritual leader of any sort, or drop them off at a random place of faith if you don't have one of your own, and just say, I felt compelled to get 3 Kroger gift cards today. Could
Mm-hmm.
you all use them?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. In my orbit, I don't know who needs them, but I know people who need them are gonna find their way into this space.
Yeah.
Um, so there are many different ways we can all help, um, and we can all be aware. And just in general, again, a lot of this is in our own hearts and minds, but trying not to assume that somebody needing SNAP or other supplemental income benefits um, means anything about their character.
Yeah.
Because that's not a narrative we hear a lot around a lot of these issues. It's very easy to narrow the scope of these issues to this type of person or that type of person, and it's just not true.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Justin, thank you so much for having this conversation. I know it can be a bummer of a conversation, but I hope that folks have a bit more awareness if they didn't already, and that we can remember that connection and kindness and uh, just being community together uh, can be a really positive outgrowth out of a crisis like this. These are in fact the moments that can bring us closer together and help us take better care of one another.
Absolutely, and again, like you said, thank you for having this conversation with me, Becca. And I think it's a good reminder to have, regardless of what's going on in the political environment around us. This conversation and conversations like it are good reminders as we head into the, you know, what seems like nonstop, relentless cheeriness of the holidays, and
Mm-hmm.
some of that is nuanced, and so it's good to have these conversations every so often. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you everyone so much for listening. We are just so glad to have you join us as part of these conversations. And if you want to be a speaking part of the conversation, we would love to hear from you. You can reach out to us through our social media platforms on Facebook. You can also email us at pwp@thejulianway.org. If you have a comment on a previous episode, if you have a question you'd like to ask, or a topic for an episode you'd like to suggest, we would love to hear from you. If you would like to support the work of the Julian Way, we would so appreciate that. Support from listeners like you makes this podcast possible. It also makes possible the work that we do supporting our Julian Way community members, including folks who use SNAP and folks who are food insecure. Some of the work that we do at the Julian Way includes providing financial support to disabled folks who are having trouble affording food. So if you would like to contribute to that work, you can donate at thejulianway.org, and we would be so grateful for that. And if you can't donate, one thing that you can do that really helps us, you can go on your podcast app and rate our podcast 5 stars, leave us a review, tell people what you think about the show. That really helps people find us and helps get these episodes to reach more people. And regardless, friends, just thank you for being with us. You can find us wherever fine podcasts can be found, on Apple Music, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, all of those good places. I hope that you will join us again soon. Go out and put some good into the world, friends. Really, let's all put some good into the world. Bye, guys.
Bye.